Hi, it's Dr. Bernstein. Welcome to the second part of our series on Charles Brockden Brown's Wieland. In this video, we're going to focus on a few key issues that emerge or that you should be focusing on when you're reading the first 5 chapters, so about the first 50 pages of the novel. One of the things that you might notice right away is that this story is told using the first person point of view. What you don't know right away is the identity of this person. And that's something I think you should think about is like, why doesn't Brown, as the author, let us know right away the identity of this narrator? But what's also, I'll just tell you right now that the first person narrator here is Clara, Wieland's sister. And she's the person who's telling us the story. So we're seeing everything in the story really through the lens of her consciousness, through her writing. And as Kelly Griffith points out, with this point of view, one of the characters tells the story, eliminating the author as the narrator. And the narration, as I just said, is restricted to what one character says he or she observes. So, as I mentioned in the first video in the series, Brown's novel really raises a lot of questions about knowledge. It's about epistemological, sensory, mental, and sensory seduction, and it raises a lot of questions about how do we know? What's the range of our knowledge? What are the limits of our knowledge? And so obviously, if you have an omniscient narrator, if that's a narrator who can like sort of tell you everything and grant you this definite insight into everything. The limited omniscient narrator, say in Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, it's still a knowledgeable narrator, but there are limits to it. But first person is clearly everything is being seen and shown and expressed through this one person's mind. So there are more restrictions on this person's knowledge. So I want you to think about when you're reading, I want you to think about these issues. Like, who is this narrator? What limits might there be to her knowledge? What evidence does she use to ground her knowledge? How does she know what she knows? And in fact, these are issues that you should be thinking about in relationship to all the characters that you're being introduced to. So, what is their perspective on what's going on? And of course, you need to remember that we're getting their perspective through her perspective. And what types of evidence do they trust? And just as importantly, for this narrative, you really need to think about where you stand in relationship to the events and the interpretations of them. And you need to think about how you're making sense of the information that's being given to you. Which character or characters do you find yourself aligning with? What evidence do you trust? Now, as you might recall from the first video in the series, Susanna Rowson, one of the 18th century novelists, she as an author intervened in the preface to her book to tell readers how they should interpret the events in her heroine's life and sort of how to interpret the book as a whole or how to use the book as a whole. But Brown does something different. Michael Gilmore, a scholar, points out that Brown, through his narrator Clara, seems to authorize the subjective judgment of the reader. And later on, we're going to talk about this issue of subjectivity in relationship to knowledge, in relationship to the Enlightenment and the rest of the novel. So I just want to plant this seed in your mind now. But if you look on page 5, which is the first page of the novel, Clara tells readers that she acknowledges our right to be informed of the events that have lately happened in her family and encourages us, and this is an exact quote, she encourages us to make what use of the tale you shall think proper. So if you've read The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne's classic 19th century American novel, this line will resonate with you because in the conclusion to the novel, after we've been given a series of interpretations and theories about something that happened, um, the limited omniscient narrator tells us that the reader may choose among these theories, like which one are we going to choose and why. So the difference here is that with Brown's narrative, we're implicated right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, we're implicated in the interpretation of evidence, and we need to think about what use we're going to make of this tale. And while we're speaking of Hawthorne, I want to point out another parallel here. As you remember, a great deal of the Scarlet Letter was centered on the interpretation of a past event, an event that occurred, well before the novel starts. And we don't even really get a lot of the details about what happened. It's all about sort of the interpretive sort of consequences after the fact. Now, to a certain extent, this is true of Brown's novel. It's a narrative that centers around the mysterious death of Clara and Wieland's father and the strange, terrifying, sublime events that ensued later in their lives. But it feels very present when we're reading it because we're getting many, many, many more juicy details about these events, these past events, through Clara than we did in the Scarlet Letter. So we're getting a lot of these details, but we have to remember this is an interpretation after the fact. And it's Clara who's trying to make sense of these events. And then she sort of talks about how other characters are trying to make sense of the event. So while you're reading, I want you to think about this issue that I raised in the first video. What were the early impressions imprinted in the mind of their father? Because in the beginning of the novel, we get some background information on Clara and Wieland's father. So what were the early impressions imprinted in his mind? What was his life like? What did he believe? How did he come to believe? Like, what do you make of how he came to believe? And then, like, what were the early impressions imprinted in the minds of Clara and Wieland? What were their lives like? What did they believe? How did they come to believe? And then you need to position yourself in relationship to them and your interpretation of what Clara is sharing. So what I want you to do, what I'm going to challenge you to do, is find at least in these 50 pages, find at least 5 really good passages that somehow address the issues that I've been describing in these first 2 videos on Wieland, and develop your analysis of them as fully as possible in relationship to these issues that I've outlined. And you definitely go past beyond what I've been saying and create your own interpretation that you can support with evidence. And we will talk about them when I get back to class. So that's it for now. And again, if you like this video, I would like it if you liked it. I would love it if you left a comment, and I'd also love it if you subscribe to my channel. So that's it for now. I'll see you soon. Bye.